Well, I have to go a step further and even question your use of the phrase "a serious atheist." I don't know that we've had a serious atheist since Bertrand Russell, and it's been a little while since he walked the earth. These
Fair
modern
enough.
people are not terribly serious. I mean, some of them are journalists, like Sam Harris has a podcast. I mean, I have a podcast too. I just don't pretend to be, a great theologian. I'm a guy who talks to a camera, which is basically what Sam Harris is, and he pretends that he's the greatest theologian, since Thomas Aquinas, greater than Thomas Aquinas. The question of science, I guess all of those guys use science as an example. It's just so historically illiterate. They must not have ever heard of Father George Lemaitre, the Catholic priest who discovered the Big Bang. They must not have heard of the Catholic who discovered the genetic code. They must not have ever heard of Isaac Newton, the founder of our modern scientific era, who was a devout Christian who spent his entire life translating scripture and interpreting scripture. Maybe they've never heard of Blaise Pascal, probably the greatest genius of the modern era. He invented the calculator, who was devout, who kept an inscription of his faith in his jacket pocket, and who famously came up with Pascal's wager in the Pensée. I mean, the list could go on and on and on. Maybe they've never heard of Cardinal Baronius, who said that Scripture tells us how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. The list goes on and on and on. All of the... For all intents and purposes, the only scientific discoveries that we have ever made in history have been made by religious people, and specifically Christians. The vast majority. And people who try to point to science as though it is contradicting faith they're that precocious 13-year-old who read half of a blog post one time, and they're talking about things about which they know nothing. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. A little humility goes a long way, but they don't have that. They don't even know enough to know what they don't know. It reminds me of Donald Rumsfeld's famous distinction between known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. I think that they fall firmly in the latter category because, of course, our scientific era was created by the church. It was created by the church and specifically by clergy, by churchmen. Now, what this has been perverted into is scientism, a totalizing religion which ignores, just as its premise, metaphysical reality. It ignores the realm of the ethical or the moral or the transcendent or the divine or the metaphysical. And it only does so convincingly, conveniently rather. So it will accept metaphysical reality when it relies on, say, mathematical axioms, the laws of mathematics, the laws of physics. Then it will rely on metaphysical reality, but it will ignore metaphysical reality when we discuss the very grounding of reality, the very grounding then of the moral law, the very grounding of ourselves, when discussing the unmoved mover, when discussing arguments from contingency. Then they play dumb, and the people who fall into that silly scientific materialism and scientism are playing dumb as well. Maybe they're not just playing it.